Good evening, Springfield. Welcome to the Township of Springfield Planning Board meeting of July 11th, 2022. Adequate notice has been given in accordance with the Sunshine Law. Notice was published on December 16th, 2021 in the Star Ledger, and posted in the Annex building on December 17th, 2021. Let's do a salute to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
to the
of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
and
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perfect. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Let's do a quick roll call.
Sure. Mayor Alex Kaiser,
I'm present.
Committeeman Rich Huber,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. David Barnett,
I'm here.
Mr. Andrew Schwartz,
Present.
Mr. Aaron Lofer is absent, Mr. Brian Brendel,
Here.
Ms. Marissa Ruggiero,
Here.
Mr. Thomas Lopes,
Here.
Mr. Scott Wishna.
Here.
I see you. Okay. Vice Chair Sharon Kessel
Here.
and Chairman Jeff Tiger.
Yep.
We have a quorum.
All right. Perfect. Okay. So we have meeting minutes for June 13th that I would like us to pass. They've been on the Google Drive. Everyone, I'm sure, had a chance to review it. Can I have a motion to approve the June 13th, 2022 meeting minutes?
You have a motion.
Mr. Barnett seconded, right? Mr. Barnett?
Hold on. I was just seeing, was that the meeting I missed, or was that the meeting I was at? I'm just looking up.
Nope. That was the meeting you missed, so you cannot second it.
I'll
That's
second
where I
it.
was. Thank you.
Ms. Kessel seconded. Can I have a roll call? Oh, actually, no, never mind. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Mr. Barnett abstained.
Thank you.
Mr. Tiger, me too. Abstain, please.
Yep, that's correct. Okay, next is the June 28th, 2022 meeting minutes. Everyone have a chance to review that on the Google Drive?
The 28th was the one I missed. The 13th I was at.
Okay, well, then I abstained from both. It doesn't
Doesn't matter. It's fine.
Yes. Can I have all in favor of the June 28th, 2022 meeting minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Abstain.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so motion passes. Okay, so the next thing is our environmental commission. They're obviously a very important partner with the planning board. Some of the items like tree replacement, drainage, and so forth is always top of the mind in the environmental commission. Marissa is our environmental rep, and she's going to take 2-3 minutes to give us an update of what they're doing. And the board can give feedback back to the environmental commission, and then in the fall we'll have someone from the environmental commission come on for 10-15 minutes to kind of give us some direction on what are the new things that they're looking for the year ahead. So Marissa, without further ado, 2 quick minutes, 3 minutes.
The environmental commission has been busy. They had a rain barrel workshop. Actually, I should say the last meeting that I attended was June 20th. So this is things that we talked about in the June 20th meeting. So they had a rain barrel workshop, which was very successful. Also wanted to let everybody know about, there's a Trex program. So we are collecting, and actually it's being sponsored by the Girl Scouts, collecting all kinds of plastic bags, wrappers, all things like that. And there are locations, there's a location at Chisholm at the pool and at the library. So, and that's being collected until September 6th. So that's, and that will get us a chair, a bench, I'm sorry, made out of Trex. So that's what the collection is for. Okay, and then also the quarry walk was held and it was very successful. So we're looking into possibly doing another one in the fall. And so there's that. That is something that we were in favor of doing. And really the biggest thing that we talked about at the meeting, we discussed the Floor and Decor application that we had been approved and raised concerns primarily about the trees that were being cut down, which is something that I had raised at that meeting as well. We know that there will be, my understanding is that there's going to be replanting of 40 trees and that there's going to be $10,000 to the town to replant in the escrow fund. But the concerns were, what happens when that money's in the fund? How is that distributed? So they just want more information about that in particular. So that's something that I'd like to bring back to them.
Yeah, and so to be clear, there's about 100, and Mr. Disco can elaborate, but there was about 140 trees. They weren't, some of them were really, really like not tree trunk trees. There was probably, 30 or so, and Mr. Disco can give exact numbers that were trees, but Floor and Decor agreed to take, whatever trees that they can't put on site times $100, which is about $10,000. So it could be plus or minus. Now, how distributed, I did talk to the township administrator, and he's going to work with the mayor on determining, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to plant 100 trees. We can plant 30 or 50 trees that are bigger trees that will meet some of the concerns of the Environmental Commission. But we will get back to you, the Environmental Commission on the exact way that the money and the trees, the Robbie in Buildings and Grounds, they plant the trees, at some point in time. So we'll work through the timing of that and be able to get back to you. Mayor, did you have anything to add?
I think you summed it up well. There's different ways to go about it. We can get older trees, for lack of a better term, that might be bigger, like you said, and we can advise and work with. And my commitment is to work with the Environmental Commission in selecting it. They do have some members there that have some expertise, and I would like the township and its DPW department to work a little more in tandem with the Environmental Commission. So appreciate the moment for the update.
And Marissa, we'll ask them to come over to us in probably October-ish, depending on our meeting agenda, to have them come. Michael, do you want to update real quick on the trees? Was it about 100-ish?
About that, yeah, they had a lot of that were under 12-inch diameter, as you were alluding to.
Yeah. Okay. So as far as the disbursement of that, we'll get the mayor and we'll get back to you guys, the environmental or John, we'll get back to you guys on how that's distributed.
Okay. And the overall discussion was, partly, started by the Floor and Decor discussion, but there's an overall concern just in general about trees being cut down and the impact, especially in Springfield, where we do have a flooding issue. So I know that that's just something I think for us to keep in mind when we receive the applications.
Yeah, any applicant that comes before us, we will obviously enforce the tree management ordinance. And any application that comes before us on a site plan doesn't mean we can't add trees onto the property, even if they're not taking down on a site plan, or we can't suggest that. So that'll be something we'll do. Perfect.
Thank you.
Any members of the board wish to ask anything from Marissa? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to take a quick minute to go to the application because I see members of the public, so I don't want them to sit and wait if they don't choose to. So application, I think it's for, if my printer didn't print out, 20-22S, 130 Route 22, 3106 Lot 1 for preliminary and final site plan of a conditional use Story Dispensary of Springfield LLC. I'm told from our attorney that applicant did not notice properly. That applicant will come before us tonight as a very informal meeting. There will be no testimony taken on that application. They will simply hear from our professionals of some of the concerns. The board members may give some comments or some questions, and that application will come back to us on August 8th at the same time, 6:30, and notice will be done. Mr. Keynes, do you want to give a quick, sum it up for the members of the public?
Yeah, I think so. And there is no testimony tonight. Nobody will be sworn in. My suggestion, Mr. Chairman, is that we have Michael and Keenan just kind of give a highlight film and then just call out anything else that's necessary. Quite frankly, it's conditional use. It appears that they probably meet the conditions. We just want to make sure that the record is clear on that. So that was why I suggested that it be carried. It'll be preliminary and final site plan. There may be a performance guarantee issue for maybe some repairs on the site. I don't know whether that's going to come up as a result of Michael's report. But other than that, then we'll be all set to go at the next hearing.
Perfect.
I had a chance to talk to their attorney. He is understanding, and we just want to get it done, and we want to get it done quickly, and we want to get it done correctly in accordance with the law, whatever that means.
We'll skip the resolutions now and go into the application. So for members of the public, we're not going to take any testimony on this application, though at the end of the meeting, the board does open it up to the public to discuss any general questions that the public may have. But I just wanted you folks to be aware of, if you're there for that application, that we're not going to be questioning any of the witnesses, the boards, we're not swearing anyone, no testimony. So this application actually will be heard on
On what date? You went by?
August 8th.
Thank you.
And there will be notice, so if that changes. So that being said, let's bring up the applicant's attorney, and we can kind of talk a little bit through some of the logistics. Boo, we're trying to get the applicant's attorney in here. Is it Cameron?
Rejoining, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, evening all.
Good evening, counselor. So I don't know if you heard, I know that you've been in contact with our counsel, which was great.
Glenn and I spoke, and I appreciate his wisdom. So we'll.
Yes, we do too. He's been our board attorney for over a decade now, probably, or more. That being said, so what I want to do is kind of limit this to about 15, 20 minutes. I want our professionals, you can hear from our professionals what are the concerns they have. I'll open up to the board so they can give they can give some, feedback. Nothing is binding, obviously. This is just a quick, cursory review of the application, and you'll come back on August 8th and provide testimony and hopefully clean up the application, hopefully have a sign package by well, so the board can, have a clean application. Is that fair? Yes, sir.
And Cam, you can ask any questions of the professionals if you need some clarification or something too. It can be a dialogue. Okay.
I appreciate it.
Perfect. So I'm going to start with Mr. Disco. He sent you guys a letter dated July 8th, 2022. I believe it is a few pages long, 6 pages long. So Mr. Disco, do you mind kind of starting with that application, that letter, and take us through a little bit of it and your concerns?
Sure. Just to provide the setting, this is at 130 Route 22. It's a multi-tenant site. Tuka, a Japanese hibachi takeout restaurant, is there, as well as Advanced Auto Parts. There's 3 basically storefronts. One is vacant now. That was a T-Mobile store for many years. That's the place that the applicant is seeking to fulfill. Advanced Auto has been there. I think I documented it's been there for many, many years. And Tuka came and replaced what was a Dunkin' Donuts, and Dunkin' Donuts moved further east, right along the Union Township border. There's no changes to the site in the sense that the building will remain as is. The tenant spaces will remain as is. There's no facade changes. There's no sidewalk, or any changes proposed. It's basically the site as it is. It will be the same for this tenant. Some minor site stuff was identified, the stop signs and the no right turns on the one ways of Route 22 seem very, very faded and dated. So I think it would be prudent to replace those. Those are low cost items. The application did not incorporate signs for this application, which is fine. They would have to understand that they would have to be variance free in any sign submission. And certainly, if anybody wanted to comment on that, they could add to that.
Yeah, Mr. Disco, I'm going to jump in there. So, Counselor, I understand from my counsel that the sign must state exactly the name of the LLC that is on the application to the state. So that being said, you're basically kind of limited to whatever your LLC name is. I mean, you could drop the LLC from the thing. So it should be Story Dispensary of Springfield should probably be the sign. But I think from what the board, and we'll open up to the board when we go around, that you follow the same font and size at the AutoZone and the Japanese restaurant. So it's all uniform basically on the building and the pylon sign that's out on 22. Mr. Disco, would you concur?
Yeah, there's 2 pylon signs and small ID places on those two pylon signs. I think they have 3 facades facing the DOT right-of-ways, east, U-turn, and west. So that's where I think where your gist of where the sign changes would come on the facade itself. They're limited to 5 feet in height, 60% of the tenant space width, no more than 10% of the wall area. And then there's obviously some language in our sign ordinance that prevents certain things, flashing, and, messaging, intermittent, that type of thing.
And Mike, in that regard, is the limitation on wall area per side of building? So it's not a cumulative wall area coverage. It's on this side that, and run the percentages around.
You would basically have 3 independent sides to your building. So the width and the area would be pro rata for each of those 3 sides.
Okay.
The ordinance does permit, if you face a right-of-way, in this case, it does face 3 DOT right-of-ways, you're permitted 1 sign per right-of-way facing facade.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, the only thing, and I'll defer to Mr. Disco when you guys meet to discuss this, is the one side of the building for all the tenants don't have anything on there. So what would be the benefit of having it on the one side where people would think that that's the door as opposed to the other side? It will be something that Mr. Disco, you can partner with them on to figure out what the best course of action would be. Because I don't know if it's best to have their sign on one place and then not on the rest, where they're not there. But I'll defer to you to work that. The board will defer to you, I'm sure.
That's a good point. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, please continue, Mr. Disco.
Just kind of bouncing back here, cannabis businesses, and there are several classes of businesses. This is a class 5 or a retail. There are the Springfield Land Use Ordinance and the Springfield General Code addresses the parameters for these establishments. So in terms of zoning or the land use ordinance, basically it has to meet buffers from schools, playgrounds, residential zones, and it does that. It meets all of those itemized tasks or itemized notations to be a conditional use properly in the HC zone on Route 22. That analysis was done in advance because that has to be approved by the mayor council, and that was done, and there's a resolution to that. So the location of this is appropriate for the business. Beyond that, there are other conditional use items, and I think there's 12 of them, and we enumerated them. Keenan did as well, I think. And the applicant would obviously have to meet those conditional use standards. So they should be prepared to address that when they come back formally. One of which is cannot look through the window to see the product. So I think they were proposing a glazing on the window to address that particular conditional use standard.
That is correct, sir. Yep.
There's a dumpster on site that is currently used by all 3 tenant spaces there. It is a walled and fenced facility on the east side of the building. Recently, we saw that there are some of the dumpsters are outside of that enclosed area. So whether that's a owner / other tenant issue, that would have to be cleaned up. The parking lot, as was alluded to, is somewhat in not the newest pavement condition. And so there probably would be some discussion we would suggest between the applicant and the owner on that, and whatever other mechanism the board sees fit on that. There'll be no change in circulation. There's no change in drainage. There's no improvements on the site. There's no proposed landscaping at the site. It's got a rather bland grass area surrounding the building. I see the chairman wanted to jump in there on that. So
Let me jump in. Counselor, I would propose that you sit with Mr. Disco and Mr. Hughes to come up with I'm not talking about a massive landscaping, but some small bushes around, so it's not in the center. But we can get something that looks a little bit to make it look a little bit nicer for our meeting.
And that's something we've been discussing and considering, Mr. Chairman. So I think we're all of the same mind there.
Perfect. Mr. Disco, like always, anytime we have an application come out, I usually ask you to go out to a similar business. When Floor and Decor came out, you went out and checked out the sites as it was able to be. So you're able to give the board some feedback. I understand you went out to Union to review that site. I hope you didn't try samples or anything, but if you can give the board a little bit of information on what you did at the site and the number of patrons that came in and out. It's from a trip generation type of thing.
As the board members should be aware, most of the municipalities in the area declined to permit cannabis businesses. So if you go west, Scotch Plains, Mountainside, Milburn, North Plainfield, Westfield, I think they all declined on this. So really, we didn't have many opportunities in the immediate area other than Union. Union has had the one on Route 22 on the eastbound side, and that has been there for several years, opened as a medical cannabis and has switched into the retail business as well. So I camped out there last Thursday afternoon and evening just to watch the comings and goings. I documented that. I see the chairman smirking at me. So I listed basically what that place has in terms of ingress, egress, and visitors to the site. In the peak hour, it was estimated you had about 40 people coming and going to the site in the period anywhere from 4:30 to 6 o'clock at night, that type of thing. It's pretty active. The average customer is in and out in probably, I'd say, under 10 minutes. They leave with a little blue bag and have their product in the bag. I presume these are people that have either been to these stores before, they order online, or they have repeat orders or standard orders that they pick up. You could certainly tell that there were customers that came probably for the first time and they were in there for longer, maybe 25, 30, perhaps even 35 minutes. The Union store had security guards present inside and outside. They were armed. There was designated parking for the establishment. The Springfield site has much more parking than the Union site, so it's probably not a great comparison. The Springfield site has 56 parking spaces for the 3 users. When we were out there last week, anecdotally looking at Advance Auto and Tuca, they hardly have any parking demand there. Literally, we saw 6 cars parked there on the site. So there's ample parking at the present time for the new establishment. I don't know what else I can add about the Union store. Again, it was a pretty routine customer visit. People can park right outside the site. We also did see a lot of walk-up people, whether they're parking in satellite lots or in the neighborhood businesses and walking in. We saw that as well.
Perfect. All right. Well,
so Mike, if I can, one other question from your report, actually, you'd mentioned something about the accessibility parking standards and the requirements of the site. I know we're right at, I think, the inflection point where you've got, the 1 to 25, 26 to 50, right. 51 up. You'd mentioned that there should be 3 accessible parking spaces. It looks like there are 2.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. So.
Yeah, though the ADA standards is not something we can really give you relief from. That is a federal and a code issue. I don't know how long the 2 accessible spaces have been there, whether there were 3 at one time and 1 disappeared, or whether when they added the ADA spaces, they just added 2 instead of 3. First one has to be a van accessible. The way you're set up, you have an aisle width that looks like it's about an 8-foot aisle width between the 2 adjacent parking spaces. So you would satisfy the van accessible requirement. You would just need to add the 1 van accessible placard. And somewhere else on the site, you would need to add another accessible space, which has to be a minimum of 8 feet wide with a 5-foot aisle. So you would need 13 feet to achieve that additional ADA space. So unfortunately, you may lose 2 spaces
In order
to
to-
add the one, unless there's an opportunity for minor altering of one of the bump out grass islands or something to that effect.
And that's something I'll definitely encourage our client to look into with the landlord, because that's obviously more their obligation than ours.
Yes.
But we'll certainly work with them on that, and then also talk about the the best way to remediate any of the pavement conditions, as I know that's something both you and the chairman have highlighted this evening.
So before we go to our planner, I just want be prepared the next time you come to have some testimony on, what discussions you've had with the police, with security, what type of security you're going to have on site, potentially what's needed, what's not needed, give the board some testimony and education on that would be helpful. And then you heard about the parking lot to come together. And then obviously a sign package resolved in advance. So that way it's easier for the board. So we're not guessing and trying to design. You can work with Mr. Disco and Mr. Hughes on that.
Absolutely.
So
Thank you, Chairman.
thank you.
And I would just add, Mr. Chairman, they did supply a floor plan. It was detailed. So I think there should be no issue with how anybody can understand how the operation works. As being part of the town engineering department and the mayor, I've sat in with the mayor on these. We probably had 8 people approach the township. So we really did get up to speed on what's involved with these things. They are highly regulated. That's the first thing everybody should understand. It's an extremely scrutinized financial process that the state undertakes for this. So these are not fly-by-night operations. In fact, my take on it is these are very large entities that have to fulfill these very strict financial requirements, quite frankly. So I think in terms of how the site will operate, it will have to meet all the state and local regulations that have been set out by the state for cannabis use as early as last August. And they are still being developed to some degree, but I believe that this application, again, has been screened from the buffer standpoint by mayor council, and they are making their applications through the state process too. So obviously, if they don't meet anything from the state review process, any action we take would be mute. They're just doing it parallel to minimize the potential downtime if they do get approved.
That would be a good question to ask before we go to our planner. Counselor, can you give us an update on your state licensing? There's several different things that you can apply to the state for. Is it a conditional use? Is it a primary use? If you can give us a little bit of the background on that. And then for the board, once we finish with Keenan, you guys will open it up to the board to ask questions. So everyone will get an opportunity to ask our professionals some questions as well.
So on the front of what exactly we're in front of the CRC for or anything like that, I have to plead a level of ignorance. I'm land use and redevelopment world. I don't really play in ABC or CRC world, but that's something that I've just texted one of the operators and he's replied they have been awarded a conditional award already. And I see the mayor nodding along, and that was in some large part thanks to the support of the mayor and council in that regard. We do have to file the annual, however. So,
okay,
Jeff, let me ask Cameron a question.
Sure.
Do you have any idea, Cam, whether there's a date on that conditional approval that you received that this has to be operational by?
I will ask. And
would you ask and just get back to me so that we know? Apparently, there's no state.
I'm watching the dots right now. So no, there's just a deadline to file the annual. There's no
Okay.
operation. So
Because some of the applicants that our office has seen said that, well, it had to be in by, they were giving us dates like August 1st, September 1st. And it turned out that what we actually learned today is that it's the conditional that you just talked about. And the bottom line of the conditional is that it may have some additional benchmarks that you have to satisfy. So if you could at least find that out for the next
Yeah.
time. But
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I have a feeling, and I know I've got one that's a flipping of the switch application. That one does have a period of time that it has to be operational by before it can even go to the next step. As Mr. Chairman, you'd suggested, there are all kinds of different tweaks and twerks within the regulatory framework here. So we're certainly working that all through. So
great. Thanks,
I had-
Cameron.
Yeah.
I had Ken 101 this morning with our attorney, so
did you?
I've learned a lot, and he did too. Let's go to our planner. Keenan, you wrote us a letter on July 8th, 2022 to the board. If you can just give a quick overview of that and kind of talk through some of the issues, and then we'll open it up to the board to ask you and Michael some questions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I think Michael covered most of the key points. I guess what I would just add to the mix here would be, well, first of all, just a little bit more on the parking situation. I think, as I say in my first comment in the letter, I think Cameron and his team should take a close look at the parking requirement. It's based on their plans. They show a 12,000 square foot building, and they use the general retail requirement, which is one space for every 200 square feet. However, there is a restaurant on the property, and the restaurant actually, per code, is calculated based on the number of seats. So I think if they ran that calculation, they might get a different number in terms of the actual requirement. I think that would be a good exercise before the next time we meet. We've covered signage. I know there's a traffic impact statement, which is included in their application. We just asked for a little information on, who prepared it and sort of the context for that. That's my comment number 3. And then comments number 4, 5, and 6 really tie into the conditional use requirements. And we're really just looking for a little testimony to the board regarding odor control, solid waste management. If there's any mechanical equipment that's needed for this facility, where is that going to go? And then comment number 7 is just testimony on deliveries and including any security protocols related to the delivery of the cannabis product in particular. And then also comment number 8, I know some of these places do have curbside pickup service, and I think Mike might have referenced that in connection with the Union facility. So to the extent that's proposed here, just some testimony on what's anticipated in terms of those operations. And then the final comment was just what the chairman touched on earlier, just relative to landscaping. I think there's an opportunity probably along the building for some low shrubs on the westerly facade. But we can talk about that perhaps offline before the next meeting if you have any questions, Cameron.
No, that'd be great.
But that would be it.
Okay.
So Counselor, I know that one of my board members, Mr. Wishon, is going to ask this, so I'll bring it up in advance. If there's going to be some curbside, please, in your calculation with parking spots, if there's a curbside spot that's dedicated for this use or something like that right in the front for pickup, please put that in your calculation and make sure that you clear whether you need a variance or not for parking before noticing, so there's no issue for the next one.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Perfect. So given that, let's, I'm going to just call board members in order and just feel free to ask Mike or Keenan a question, or even if you have a question from our counselor or their counselor. This is informal. Again, anything we say is non-binding. Even if we give one direction, we can go another direction at the next board meeting. So I'll go with Mr. Schwartz first.
Believe it or not, I'm going to pass. I will wait for the formal testimony.
Okay. Mr. Barnett.
I don't really have any questions. I'll also wait for the formal testimony. At this point, at 30,000 feet, I don't see anything inconsistent with our ordinance. So that's good. I'm always wary and cautious about any of the businesses in the center median, especially around U-turns, which is what we have here. I do think that this use will be a heavier usage in general than the existing businesses which are there. So I just think we should be careful about the ingress and the egress, especially adjacent to those U-turns. But then we're very it's hard to do that because it is there and we're limited by what's there. So, but overall, I'll wait until the testimony. And as I said, I don't really see anything that's inconsistent now with our ordinance.
Perfect. Mayor?
No questions. As I think it's been stated, I've had a number of meetings and several hours with Mike Disco and the administration as we've been meeting with and continue to meet with even tomorrow with applicants. So I have no questions. I just know that this has certainly gone through an extensive review as already, and this board continues to do its due diligence in making sure that we have the right choice for our town. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Brendel?
Yeah, nothing specific on this application, but two general questions for Keenan and Mike, I guess. First of all, traffic. We talked a lot about parking. What about traffic? What types of use is this most similar to? Do we need traffic impact studies specific to center medians versus not? Kind of what do we have to do around traffic here, and what kind of uses is it most similar to?
And before you answer that question, because I'm going to add to it so you can answer the same thing, we've never had this type of establishment in the town. Is the parking demand something we need to look for, obviously it wouldn't be for this one since it's already here, but for a future one is it the right calculation of 1 per 200? Maybe it should be a higher one. I don't know. So in that question with Mr. Brendel, if you can weave that in.
And certainly from the traffic or traffic generation, the retail is the most appropriate use. Even in the study that the applicant provided, the cannabis industry, other than maybe Colorado, is in its infancy. So they don't really have a lot of records that give you decades of adequate or accurate data. So the retail, like any other retail that you pull in, go in, get something and come out, is the most appropriate. They are not having any physical or geometric changes. The use isn't counter to anything that DOT would permit. There's going to be no DOT access permit generated by this because there's no significant traffic change from the historic T-Mobile or any other thing there. So I hope that answers that. Certainly we want it to be safe, and that's why we said there's the striping at both sides of Route 22, because there is a driveway on each side, needs to be touched up. The stop signs and the no right turn signs are extremely faded, so a nighttime retroreflectivity is likely not going to pass the muster on that. So I think new signs at $250, $300 a pop is a welcome and smart thing for the applicant to do, and can certainly dress up the existing driveways as they currently are situated on the site.
Mr. Brendel, anything further?
Yeah. Mr. Hughes, did you have anything to add to that, or are we good there?
I mean, I generally concur with Mr. Disco. I don't have anything. I don't have much to add to that. I mean, he's right. It is a destination retail use, but I think this property in particular, based on the uses that are there now, certainly, and probably in the future as well, from a retail standpoint, will provide sufficient parking on site. Assuming that they're compliant in their parking supply.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was looking more for traffic than parking, but that's good to know, and that's great. Next question, Mr. Disco, you mentioned, I think, 8 total establishments have come forward, or 9, I forget if it was 8 or 9. Generally speaking, not specific to this application, how do they compare in terms of locations, size, parking on the sites, etc.? Like, I know we're not looking at this specific application, so I feel it's okay to compare all of them at a high level. If you can just speak to that.
Yeah, there are various classes. I mean, there is the potential to grow or manufacture it. We have not seen that really yet. we've essentially, and the mayor can certainly chime in as well, we've essentially been limited to people who want to do the retail aspect of it here. The Route 22 corridor seems to meet that. If you were going to grow this, I think you would probably need a much larger footprint of the site. It was interesting that almost everyone that came in terms of a potential retailer was looking at something in the order of 2,000 to 2,500 square foot as a floor space for that type of thing. So this is right in the wheelhouse of it. I think it was 2230. And it meets exactly what the target is for these retail things. These are not 10,000 square foot stores. And so this site, as well as the other sites that have been contemplated, again, they're all private, of course, people approaching us, have all been for the retail and all been comparable sites. They've all been, to my recollection, at least the ones that have been identified, are multi-tenant sites. There have been others on Route 22 in the Center Island. The one by Saporita Pizza comes to mind as a potential user. I think there's been inquiries for one of the sites on the eastbound side of Route 22 as well. That may have been more of a standalone site. So I think in terms of the parking, based upon what I saw with 56 spaces available and a minimal parking demand, I mean, Advance Auto Parts is not, even though their hours are pretty late, it's not like people are showing up there at 7 o'clock at night to purchase auto parts. Tuca, meanwhile, opens up, really for business, I think around 11. So you don't have any morning rush there. And you've got your typical restaurant, lunchtime and dinner time rushes. So to some degree, you might have, these might be considered complementary uses to what might be the peak, which I presume would be an afternoon, Saturday, or an evening weekday for this type of use. In New Jersey and in our ordinance, these things are permitted to be open 8 a.m. to, I think, 10 p.m. The application didn't really indicate what the hours were, but I presume Mr. McLeod could touch on that, whether it's tonight or another time. So I don't think that parking is going to be an issue for this site. And based upon what I looked at or saw in Union, that level of peak hour would work well here, it seems. And some of the sites, Brian, quite frankly, were just, you had people coming in without a site, but had the business and they were looking for a site. So from the sites that were identified as a vacancy in the site, the owner was willing to rent to a retail cannabis. This seems like a pretty typical type of site in terms of size and parking availability. So I hope I addressed your concern or question.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. No further questions.
And just to chime in there, Mike, if you remember, I think a couple of them were looking at this same exact site. So there was some competition for this specific building of the number of applicants.
Yeah, if you go up and down Route 22,
how much
for that space size, 2,000 to 2,500 square feet, not a lot of vacancies. I mean, you might be able to find, like where Floor and Decor was, you had a larger building. That's not really the target size of this type of use.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Mr. Huber, any questions for our professionals?
The only thing I'm concerned about is I don't want curbside pickup. I want, that has to be in his application and we vote on it. Am I correct? That has to be separate. It just doesn't get it automatically.
No, it'll be something we'll have to consider whether the site allows or can afford curbside pickup. We'll have to think through. So I think the applicant should take that as a potential concern and work with our professionals to see if they can engineer that safely and what that would be.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll preview things by telling you I think I have a good answer for that when we come to it. One that may satisfy Mr. Huber. We'll put it that way.
Well, go ahead. You can go ahead, jump through.
We're not anticipating curbside pickup at this time, sir. So
Thank you. When they started talking about it, got concerned. I don't want.
And no, and just from an operational perspective, the intent right now is that anybody who would be making an order that could be picked up would park, come inside the facility, present their credentials, get their product, and then those consumers would leave. So
Thank you.
yep.
That's it.
Well, going to curbside pickup, we'll go to Mr. Wishna.
So, for the record, I did not ask a question about curbside pickup. I did on a different application where there was many fewer parking spaces. I don't want to reiterate what has already been articulated, but I do realize that there is only anecdotal information relative to traffic and peak times. I think that Mike's observations in Union were also anecdotal, and the traffic counts that he was reporting at a smaller site with less visibility and worse access is above the number that seemed to be the highest peak on the weekends of what was articulated in the application. So I know we're not hearing that testimony now, but I would suggest that if there's a traffic engineer that's going to be presenting to us, that they have more specific anecdotal information to provide, because it seems like that's a consistent question for most of the board members. So I do think we're gonna want to see a little more information, or at least what can be procured by a traffic engineer. The second question, I cannot recall who had the comment regarding signage, and I feel like someone mentioned that the copy that's actually on the building needs to be the same as the entity name on the application. Is that a state requirement?
Yep, it is, Mr. Wishna. Glenn, do you want to opine from your research? Glenn?
The answer is yes, it's a state requirement. That's just the way it is.
Okay, so this is for Mr. McLeod. The applicant's entity name is extremely long, and if you're trying to abide by the ordinance relative to signage, the letters are going to be impossible to see. I don't know if you can modify your entity's name, but you're gonna lose any.
That's not our problem.
Signage with a giant.
That's not our problem.
Giant name.
Yeah,
That's not our problem. Not even appropriate for us as a board to bring up. The applicant has a name. They know what they have to do. The state ordinance is very clear. It's not fair to make that comment, in my opinion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Wishna, anything further?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what's on the application relative to signage.
Perfect. That takes care of that for the signs. But the signs, applicants agreed to have a sign package for us for the next meeting on August 8th. Mrs. Ruggiero?
Yes, also regarding traffic. So I wonder if there was consideration taken that I guess the observation was in July during the summer, if traffic patterns may change, throughout the year. I don't know if that's something that was taken into consideration.
I think you're referring to Mr. Disco's anecdotal experiences over in Union.
Yes.
So I'll defer to him in that regard.
Okay. And also, I mean, just historically, when would you expect the busiest hours to be in terms of people coming in?
Yeah, and that's something I think we'll get into the operational testimony on, frankly. I know that both review letters, I think, had highlighted something about the 10 o'clock closing hour being consistent across the two other uses that are there. So I'd anticipate something similar. As to when it would open, I know you can open as early as 8. And that's something I'll review with the applicant and see whether that's something they're considering.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ruggiero. Mr. Lopes?
Have any questions? Thank you.
Sharon, are you Kessel? What do you do today? Your new name? You're married. So
it's still going to be Kessel until the government allows me to change it. In any event, I don't have any questions now. I'll have some questions once I hear the operational testimony next time. But for now, I don't have anything.
Yep. And I don't have anything further anymore. So, Counselor, I think obviously this was non-binding. Take any of the questions and concerns, make an appointment and speak with Mr. Disco and Mr. Hughes, redefine the application, try to answer a lot of the questions. So that way on the 8th, the application can be, heard testimony, and then we can open up to the board and public on it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Keynes, is always a pleasure. And to all of you, we'll see you in a month.
Perfect. And for public, we will open it up for public questions, not on this application, but general comments after we go through our remaining business, which is not much longer. So thank you. We're going to go back to our resolutions on our June 13th meeting. We had several, site plan waivers, Dish Wireless waiver, 1 Cornell Parkway, block 3903, lot 16, waiver of site plan. Everyone had a chance to review said waiver, the resolution. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve that waiver?
So moved.
Mr. Brendel, do you want to, who seconded it?
I did.
Perfect. Can we have a roll call?
Mayor Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Barnett,
You can,
what's that?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Mr. Brendel,
Yes.
Mr. Wishna,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kessel,
Yes.
and Chairman Tiger.
yes. Same thing with.
What about me? Do I get asked if I want to?
No, I don't think you were here.
I wasn't here. I thought I'd been at every meeting. Okay.
Okay, good. Next one is T-Mobile Northeast LLC waiver, 51 Brown Avenue, block 2, lot 4. This is waiver. Was the thing. If I can have a motion to adopt.
So moved.
I'll second it. Go ahead, roll call, please.
Mr. Barnett,
Yes.
Mayor Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Brendel,
Yes.
Mr. Wishna,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Kessel.
Yes.
Thanks. Motion passes.
Okay, next one is Essex Mars Contracting. This was a waiver. Remember, if you recall, our board engineer came to us and said they were putting in a garage door, a larger door. It needed a waiver of site plan instead of them coming to us. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the waiver?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Barnett,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kessel,
Yes.
Mayor Kaiser,
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Brendel,
Yes.
Mr. Wishna,
Yes.
and Chairman Tiger.
Yes, perfect.
Motion passes.
The last one is Nissan World, 146, 162 Route 22 West, block 3101, lots 4, 5, and 14. This was an extension of our condition to demolish the building. I understand that, Mr. Disco, the escrow money was put in on July 1st. Is that correct?
Check was written out on July 1st. Yes.
Yes, and we've communicated to the application that when we meet the applicant, that an owner that we meet on August 8th, the building needs to be down before we commence.
They are aware of that.
Perfect. Seeing that, the board, there's a resolution that was put on the Google Drive. Any questions or concerns? All right, seeing none, can I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Ooh, who moved?
I'll
it?
second, make mine a second. I'll defer.
I'll go with the mayor.
All right.
Okay.
There you go. Good selection.
All right, Mayor Kaiser.
Yes.
And I'm not going to call you Mr. Schwartz because I don't think you could vote on it, right?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Just so you know, I'm not ignoring you.
Okay, well then I can't second it either.
I'll second it. Go ahead.
Okay. Again, Mayor Kaiser,
Yes.
Chairman Tiger,
Yes.
Committeeman Huber.
I don't know if he was here.
I have him as coming.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Brendel,
Yes.
Mr. Wishna,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Kessel.
Yes.
Motion passes.
The last thing that's not on the agenda is the discussion very quickly of the Gomes property and the sidewalk. Mr. Disco, I know that we've discussed it at prior meetings, and we'd like you, I wanted you to kind of give an update, on how closely we can get to getting something that the children can pass by September 1st, 6th, 7th, whenever the first day of school is. If I recall, well over 3 years ago, when the board heard the amended application, it was one of the board's concerns that they had a safe passageway for the kids in Walton, or any pedestrian for what that matters down in that area. But obviously mostly during school hours for the kids, that was the concern. The condition was 18 months or something like that. They ran into COVID. We understand. What's the resolution? And if there isn't one with the applicant, then I'd like to have the, try to get with the administrator and our zoning officer or zoning enforcement officer to see what can be done.
Yeah, I feel that's eventually what's going to have to happen here, because Gomes is a difficult entity in the sense that they did nothing for like 3-4 months, then worked pretty well recently to get the steel up, and then started framing the second story, and then it seemed to have died down again. So when we had a working agreement, which was to get the second story framed up along Caldwell, so that they could then build an enclosure or a cover to the sidewalk and reopen that. That work is obviously ongoing, and in the last month and a half, a good effort was made to that. It's just that if you go there every day, like we do, you see one day where there's 15 guys out there, and like today there was 4 guys out there. So obviously, I can't predict how they're going to work, but I'm almost certain that we're going to have to get involved from a zoning perspective. They're routinely on the agenda for court sessions, and I don't know how to address this adequately for anybody other than they are not in a position to open up the sidewalk as we speak. It would be more dangerous while the construction is going on right on the Caldwell side with the second story. Once the second story is fully framed and they can enclose that, yes, that would be a safer approach than not having a sidewalk. But right now, there's no ability to safely have that sidewalk there as we are on July 11th to speak of. So hopefully within the next 2 months, but again, it's subject to their workforce and how they pursue their project. They are aware of the issue and have been, it's been discussed with them multiple times, and by not only myself, the zoning officer, but the municipal attorney, redevelopment attorney, and township administrator. So it's not a secret to them. And we're struggling to be cooperative with them to get them to the right spot. It's best I can offer at this time.
So maybe for our August 8th meeting that you come back to us with what the situations be, because if not, I'm going to ask the board for, at least the approval recommendation that we ask the zoning officer on behalf of the board that the condition of our approval isn't being dealt with to execute on it.
Yeah, and one of the things offered was potentially to build, if you're aware, we have the Jersey barriers along the edge of the curb line there on Caldwell to protect the site. And one of the offerings that they offered was to put another row of barriers there and with 3 feet in between. But when we looked at it from engineering and police, the Caldwell Cartway is not wide enough to accommodate garbage truck or truck turns at that light in 2 directions with the narrow cartway, and then we would lose another 5 or 6 feet to add a walking space inboard of that. So sometimes the desire to add something just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense from going further inboard into the cartway. And as soon as it's safe to restore the sidewalk against the building, certainly that's the way to go. But it's just, I can't be honest, I can't be dishonest with anybody. As of on July 11th, it's just not safe to have people walking along that building edge right now. You don't have either floor finished in terms of the facade, and it's problematic. Now, again, they made a lot of progress with the wood framing on the Caldwell side in the last month. And if that progress were to continue, then I could think about that more favorably by the time school opened. But when I go there today and there's 4 people there, it doesn't seem like they're attacking this in a way that's going to satisfy that request. So just giving you the heads up, I gotta, I can't make a promise that I can't keep, and I don't have control of the developer on that.
So I get it, but August 8th, you can come back and give the board what you think is going to happen in the. Okay, so that's it before us right now from any new business. Our next meeting is August 8th, but at this time, I'm going to open the meeting up to any members of the public that wish to speak to anything before this board or anything planning board related. No, but note specifically to the application, we didn't have any live testimony, so there's not going to be much that the board can comment on. So Apu, if you want to take your first resident to.
Sure. First was Mr. Kepler.
If you can bring in Mr. Kepler. Now, Glenn, this is just statements, so there's no swearing anyone in, right?
There's no swearing anyone in, and I will, if you don't mind, Chairman Tiger, I will interrupt the public if I think they're going beyond, because we really should not discuss anything at all on the storage dispensary since they're not here anymore either. So if it's a procedural question, we can answer it, but that would be the extent of it.
Mr. Kepler?
Sure. Understanding the limitations of the forum and the fact that there was no testimony received today, I may be stopped sooner than I think I will, but I'll try to stay as general use as possible. Certainly, I'll probably want to be back for August 8th, but that's neither here nor there. I guess the general concern, I want to say that I have no objection to having a dispensary selling recreational cannabis in town. I was very much in favor of it. I still am. I do have a concern about where on 22 these things are placed, whether it's in the center or on one of the eastbound or westbound sides. I have significant concerns, which I heard raised today, about.
I'm going to cut this off. You crossed the line already.
Well, sure. I just want to say in general that I'm hopeful that when we reconvene for the hearing on August the 8th, that we are hearing some significant details and data on the use of anyone's parking lot or traffic access, simply because I have in my own experience, I find that these things get a lot more busy than certain anecdotal statements may have been led to believe. So I just wanted to address that concern.
You've crept up to the line again.
Mr. Tiger, can I can creep up to it all I want. Mr. Tiger,
may I? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So, just for our commenter and anyone else who's listening, historically, we have paid very close attention to traffic, in particular on Route 22, as to all applications. We are very mindful of the mess that Route 22 is and can be, and it will be issue number one, as many of my colleagues were already discussing in abstract today. We are well aware of traffic as to all applications in that corridor. I appreciate Mr. Schwartz's comments. The only other thing I would address, and again, I think it's something we'll have to come back to on any further applications, is the effect of neighboring businesses, because there's going to be an effect on neighboring businesses, not just with traffic, but also with parking. And so I just wanted to make that a statement, and I'll look forward to the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kepler.
I appreciate the board's time.
No, thank you. We'll see you on the 8th. Apu, would you like to bring in the next member of the public?
Joining now, sir.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Micah Koppelson. Thank you guys very much. Thank you, everybody, for your time this evening. Thank you very much, the Springfield Township Planning Committee. Understanding that I don't want to cross any lines or go out of line here at all. I just want to correct the record in one sense to say that there are applicants which are going to be standalone and that are larger than 2,000 square feet. So I know that that was brought up, that typically that's not what you guys have seen, but I just want to bring that up, that is, that's just something to correct the record for. I will be back on August 8th to talk a lot about some of our concerns as well, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. We'll see you on August 8th.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Any other members of the public?
Two more, sir. Aaron B., we're trying to bring you forward.
If not, bring in the next one and we can always revert back.
Yep. Next will be Mr. Jacobs.
Okay, we can bring in Mr. Jacobs, and then if the other person's on there, it's fine. Dan, you're on mute.
Hi,
There you
sorry about that. Thank you. I just want to take a minute and thank the planning board for all their time and effort that they put into the work they do. I know it goes, a lot of work goes into it, and I know it's your personal time, and I really appreciate it. I know you could be with your children or your families, but you're doing this instead, and I really appreciate it. It makes a big difference in town. I'd like to just ask about how the picking of a dispensary in town is going to work. I know that there was a company discussed tonight and that they're coming back to present in August, but that's only one company. And I'm just curious, if they do get the site approval in August, will other companies that are interested in applying in Springfield get an opportunity to apply? It would only seem fair that other companies would also get a chance to bring their stuff in front of the board.
Yeah, so Dan,
that's all I have to say. So thank you for your time.
no problem. So that's not really the purview of this board. I mean, if the mayor wants to opine, but if not, I would highly recommend you contact our business administrator, John Bolsicoco. He would be at least a great starting point on what the process may be for the town. But Mayor, is there anything you can add?
Just between our ordinance, we've at this time limited one business per class. There is, through our ordinance that we passed, an ability and through an application, and then a ranking system that will take place.
Okay, so you would be hearing from other companies, it sounds like.
There has been a number of companies that have reached out. As of now, I can tell you that there has been only 2 businesses that have completed their entire application to the township portion of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Talk to John.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Apu, any other members of the public?
I'm going to try Aaron B. one more time, but otherwise, no.
And Aaron, if we can't get you on, you should feel free to contact Mr. Disco during, or whenever the days he's working at the township, and he can answer some questions, or our business administrator can answer some questions for you.
Not seeing him join, sir, so I would move on from public.
Perfect. So seeing none, I'm going to close this member of the public and then ask the board for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded?
A second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.